I mean, it's probably not a hard and fast rule, but there's kind of this general cultural rule that I think traditionally in Japanese culture, you say Happy New Year the first time you see someone, I think for the month of January. This is my interpretation of it. But when I was at OCBC, when I first started going, I mean, I didn't know what was going on. It would be like January 25th, and people would say, hey, Happy New Year. And I was like, that was like a month ago. But it's a tradition. Another big tradition on the American side is to make New Year's resolutions. And I've noticed this a lot lately. I run, or I used to run more, and my wife and I belong to a gym, and we always dreaded the first week or two after New Year's because, and I've noticed it, I mean, just this week, everybody's running now in my neighborhood. And the gyms there's no parking at the gyms. And on a real personal note, and I hope this keeps up, but it's not going to. My wife teaches a class called Yin Yoga. And I guess Yin is kind of the cool, you hold a pose for a long time. It's a little bit related to restorative. If she was here, she'd correct me. But in my brain, it's a good explanation. Yang, or Yang, Yin and Yang. Yang Yoga is the one that you sweat a lot, you move a lot, level 1, level 2. So she teaches Yin Yoga, and most Americans want to burn a lot of calories and sweat, and they think of yoga as exercise. And so the Yin classes usually aren't as crowded, but sure enough, that Tuesday, was it Tuesday? I think it was Tuesday or Thursday. It was packed. It was packed. It was just unbelievable. I've never seen any of these people before. And then the very next week, she taught again, and the numbers dropped. And meditation service at OCBC went from like 6 or 8, it jumped up to 14 the first Wednesday back from New Year's. And we were really crowded here on the 3rd. So, I mean, I hope it keeps up. But everybody makes a New Year's resolution. And maybe the New Year's resolution is I want to try something new once. But I think a lot of people are saying, I'm going to really get in shape this year, or I'm really going to lose weight. And I read on the internet that only 8% of New Year's resolutions actually are successful. So, I'm a math major, but you don't have to be a math major. That means 92% failure rate. It could be that people had too much to drink and the resolutions aren't well thought out. But a lot of the problem is that people, there's several problems. One is they make New Year's resolutions that have a goal. They're only goal-oriented. There's no path. So for me to say I'm going to lose 20 pounds is really not helpful because there's no process or path to get there. Or if you say I'm going to get an A in my calculus class, that's very nice, but it's kind of a platitude. What actionable things are you going to do tomorrow to get an A in math? So it would be better to say, I'm not going to ditch any of my lectures, right? I had friends at UCLA that would show up for class once a month, and this one girl, she showed up finally, and it was the day we were having the midterm. She showed up and went, oh no! I'm like, yeah, if you came every day, you would know that we're having our midterm today. So, don't ditch class is an easy thing to do. Maybe just listen, put down your phone, maybe do your homework. Another one I tried, and this one's kind of hard, but you're going to have to read the section that the professor's going to lecture on. It's a lot easier to read it the day before he lectures on it than the day after. So all you have to do is just get one day ahead. You do what you're going to do anyway. It really improves your grades. And for losing weight, don't worry about losing weight at all. Just forget about it. Just say, I'm going to walk my dog around the block every night this year. I'm going to do that. And hopefully, and this happens quickly, the dog will start to nag you around 7 o'clock, right? Dinner's over, and they start whining, and they'll come up and stare at you, and they force you to go. But after a while, it becomes a fun thing. And so the idea is that you take a behavior that is, that like you know how to walk. We all know how to walk. And it has to be something enjoyable. And if you can have something that is easy to do, you know how to do it, it's easy to do, and it's enjoyable, it becomes a habit. So what this talks about today is that the only way to really change your life in the long term is to actually give up on motivation and willpower and try to find a simple, reproducible behavior that you relatively enjoy and you have it become a habit. And these are hard things to think of because we're so entrenched with goals. So one of the habits I have, and I talked to the Dharma School kids about this at OCBC, I said, who can't go to bed unless they brush their teeth? And all the kids, I mean, almost all the kids, they didn't raise their hands, right? Because their parents have to say, you've got to brush your teeth, you've got to brush your teeth. And when we had young kids, we used to go in and feel the toothbrush, and it was dry. So he's like, you didn't really brush your teeth. So then my daughter got really smart, and she just run it under the water. You know what I mean? But like, I can't go to bed if I don't brush my teeth because that's become an ingrained habit. It's a behavior. It's almost involuntary now. And I also had Invisalign. I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm way cuter now. I had Invisalign, and I wear my mouthpiece every night. I can't go to bed unless I wear my little retainer. And my dentist said I'm her best patient. So I wanted to show you, this is by a professor named B.J. Fogg, and this is his behavior grid. And this behavior grid I've read well, first of all, it's overly nuanced. There's too many cases. He's got 15 different cases up here. And I've been told by a friend of mine who's a consultant, one of the rules for being a consultant is you can only have a 2x2. You can only have 4 boxes when you give a talk. Anything more than 4 boxes is confusing. So basically, what he's saying is I'm going to use my red pointer. These are called dot behaviors, and you can do them one time. So this is something you can do one time, and you can be successful at it. These are called span behaviors, and you can do these for about 30 or 40 days. And I've noticed that when people do paleo diets, or people do a 30-day workout thing, that's about the limit that your willpower and motivation will keep you going. So you can do something big for about 30 days. And willpower and motivation is a lot like rocket fuel or sugars. You burn through them. They're powerful, but you burn through them very quickly. So I don't know if you know this, but when you go running, if you can get past 20 minutes, you can run for forever because you burn through your sugars in the first 20 minutes, and you have to be able to teach your body to burn fat. And so running is another example where it's very difficult. You make it a habit, and then once you get past 20 minutes, you can almost run as long as you want. There's also an interesting thing about running. It's called the 7-year rule, that no matter when you start running, between your 20s and your 60s, your times will improve for 7 years. Because you'll lose weight, you will get better breath, you'll become more aerobically fit. But you can't get faster and faster and faster and faster forever. So as you age, you begin to hit a peak, and then your times begin to level off and then begin to go back down. And a lot of people, and it doesn't matter when you start. You can start at 20 or 60. And the people that keep running after 7 years, even though their times are going down, it's because they've made it into a habit. And a friend of mine surfs, he's 65, and he's got a lot of arthritic. He's got an arthritic neck and his knees aren't that great. And when he swims with a snorkel now. Because when he does the freestyle, he can't turn his head to take a breath of air, so he just swims with a snorkel. But he swims every day because it's become a habit. And he surfs every day. And he told me that most 40-year-old men stop surfing at that age because their reflexes start to go. They're not the best guy out on the waves anymore, and that's why they were doing it. And when they're not the best anymore, they quit. And he told me, John, they never were really surfers, right? It was never a way of life. They were never one with the ocean. It was just a way of showing off. But down below is what he's interested in for his research. And he claims that behaviors that we do from now on that cause lasting change, I put this little red box there. He said this is the only method or approach that works. You have to do a familiar behavior from now on that's relatively easy. And that is the only way to affect long-term change in your life. So he's saying you can cut down on caffeine for 30 days. You can cut down on sugar for 30 days through willpower. You can get along with maybe, say you go to a high school reunion and there's one person from high school that hung out with you, but they drive you crazy. I mean, you could say to your husband, tonight, I'm going to go to a high school reunion, and no matter what Julie does or says, I'm not going to get frustrated, I don't want to ruin the evening, and you'll be able to do it through willpower. But willpower is the wrong strategy for long-term improvement. So you've got goals instead of process, relying on willpower, and what was the third? I'll think of it later. So I brought a couple videos of him that I wanted you to listen to. This is the one he talks about tiny changes and becoming habits.
One other way of changing your behavior long term, and I'll give you a hint, it does not have to do with motivation. Surprise. Motivation actually applies to other kinds of temporary behavior change, but not long term. In other words, relying primarily on motivation to change your behavior long term is a losing strategy. And similarly for willpower. So if you can take those off the table if you make the behavior change tiny enough. Now in this grid, this is where habits live, blue path. It's something familiar that you do from now on. And if you make that very tiny, like 2 push-ups, floss 1 tooth, and so on, it's very easy to repeat and make that become a habit. Think about it this way. You already know how to floss all your teeth. That's not what you're lacking. What you're lacking is the automaticity of flossing. So you don't need to train flossing all your teeth. You need to train making it automatic.
So the other thing he talks about a lot is that you also need a trigger. You need something that triggers the behavior, a call to action. And the reason why I'm talking about all this is not because I want you all to lose weight. It's not that. It's that I really thought this resonated with Buddhism because most of our practices are sneaky simple. It's easy to do. I mean, you know how to sit, you know how to breathe, you know how to walk, you know how to bow, you know how to use your voice and vocalize. So it's a little bit confusing to a Western person because in Buddhism, we're not giving you a bunch of goals. We're giving you a bunch of processes and practices that are relatively simple, but have a huge impact. And the one thing I've noticed is that, I don't want to use examples, let's say you binge watch TV. Because somebody in the audience might go, hey, I binge watch TV. But a lot of times the things that we think are bad habits, usually we got to that point through the same process, gradually doing a behavior over and over again until it became effortless and something we just always do. And we kind of, over time, we kind of get ourselves into a mess. And so we think we need a big silver bullet, a big home run to change this bad habit or get us out of the mess we're in, like maybe bad grades. But you also get yourself out of it the same way you got into it. You just need to replace it with different habits and different activities that also become a habit and a behavior long term. There was a movie on, Ebenezer Scrooge, Christmas Carol as an example, who somebody made a lot of little decisions and ended up in a very bad place. There's a movie with Gillian Anderson called House of Mirth. I thought it was going to be I thought mirth meant happy. She makes a lot of small decisions, and by the end of the movie, she's destitute, a drug addict, and she's out on the streets in the early 1900s. When they're, as a woman, if you're not married, you're in deep trouble. And the guy she thought was going to marry her didn't, and she quit her job before she thought she was going to get married, and then she started to do, I think, opium or something, and by the end of the movie, her whole life was down and out. But any one decision she made seemed reasonable, but all strung together over a 10-year period. A really depressing movie. So what he says is you need to plant a very tiny seed, but in the right spot. And this really reminded me of the Hondo, right? The incense, the bells, the chanting, working together as a group. I was listening to a movie reviewer yesterday who said that movie theaters are dying. Everybody's streaming. But he said there's still something about seeing a movie. It's a communal experience. 40 or 50 people in a room together, watching a scary movie, screaming, laughing, crying together. That can't be reproduced in your house. And so that's kind of the way the Buddha Sangha is. You could try to do yoga at home on a DVD that you buy from Amazon, Or you could buy guided meditation tapes and do it at home in your bedroom at night. But it's just not the same as being in a hondo with your peers practicing together. It's just a different... So what he says is if you... What he did was, the example he uses is he bought fertilizer for his garden. And really good fertilizer is supposed to have no seeds in it, because you don't want to fertilize your plants and have all these weeds come up. And he uses chicken fertilizer. And I guess somehow, I think... I'm reading, I'm not using all my farmer knowledge, but I think the chicken ate a pumpkin and the seed came out and ended up in the manure, and he fertilizes his garden, and without doing anything, he gets this gorgeous giant pumpkin grew without any effort. And that's a little bit like awakening in Buddhism. You plant the seed in the right spot over a long period of time, and you will get a pumpkin.
Here's the phrase, and it comes down to this. I live up in the wine country. I do a lot with the earth as much as I can, and this seems to map exactly what I'm talking about. Plant a tiny seed in the right spot, and it will grow without coaxing. The tiny seed. This pumpkin came from a tiny seed that actually we didn't even plant. It came from the chicken manure that we put in the garden. And it grew. We didn't have to do anything to it. It just grew with tiny seed in the right spot. So I encourage you to look at your lives, look at what you want to change, break it down to tiny behaviors, and put them in the right spot. The right spot is after something you're already doing, and allow it to grow. You don't have to amp up motivation. You don't have to draw that much on willpower. All you have to do is plan it out and let this natural process emerge. Thanks, everybody.
So oftentimes in Buddhism you hear about negative habitual behaviors. But when I read the Buddha's teachings, I don't really think Buddhism's a religion that changes human nature. Like, I think he accepts that we take habits, we take behaviors and we convert them into habits, and then we convert them into a way of life. And Buddhism, I think what the Buddha did is he's just giving us a different set of behaviors and actions to take that will lead to a different set of habits and a different trajectory for our lives. And so, I mean, my wife talks about this in yoga. I talk about it all the time. Buddhism and yoga, learning math, learning Spanish, all these things pay off. But it takes a long time, and you have to stick with it, and your expectations can't be too high. And you kind of have to marry yourself to the process. And we use the word faith in Buddhism. You kind of have to have faith in the teacher or in the tradition. Like if you want to be a ballerina or you want to be a yoga instructor, you kind of have to believe that there's something in it of value for you, and that the instructors or the studio or the temple has a history, and they know what they're doing. Just like when my son is becoming a PA. I mean, they told him, we know what we're doing. We've converted people like you into PAs for the last 25 years. Just relax, do what we tell you, and in 2.5 years, you will be a full functioning PA working in an emergency room. I mean, it's fait accompli. And the dean of the school, Teague told me he was going to say this when they got their white coat last August, when he was halfway done. He was going to say, trust the process, trust the process. And he said that throughout the graduation speech. So, and I think most of the Buddhist sermons are about that. He's trying to get people to practice. He's not trying to enlighten them, per se, but he's trying to get them on the path and approach life in this way. So this not only works for New Year's resolutions, but it also works for spiritual resolutions as well. Thank you. Please join me in Basho.